for joining us today for another live session with PRPOI. This is our 29th episode, and I'm delighted that we've been successful in creating valuable and insightful conversations on PR and for you for the last 29 weeks, every Saturday at 12 noon. Today, we bring you another fabulous episode from our In Transit series. This series brings you stories and experiences of PR professionals that started from India and moved on to create global successful careers in different verticals of PR. If you ever an international career in PR, today is your chance to know more from our global panel. Before I introduce the panel, I will take a moment to thank our media partner, Agency Reporter, our industry partner, PRCAI, and this would not have been possible without the excellent curation done by my co-founders, Sonali Sokal and Pooja Trehan. So let's introduce the panelists. Our first panelist today is Akshata Kalyanpur. She is the Director, Strategic Communications for Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan Canada. She has more than 20 years of public relations and communications experience. She's worked in government, corporate environments, as well as PR agencies in India and Canada. She moved to Canada 13 years ago and has created a successful career in PR in that country as well. So let's add her on. Hi, Akshata.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's really late there. Really appreciate taking the time to join us today. I'm going to take a moment to introduce our second panelist and then we talk. Our second panelist is Sunina Shetty. She is the brand and marketing lead at Aurizon, Australia. This is the largest rail operator and a top 50 ASX company. Her communication career spans over 18 years across industries like infrastructure, mining services, healthcare, fashion, and consumer goods. She started her career in public relations in India, working for leading PR consultancies before moving to Australia and creating a successful career there. So let me add her on. Hi, Sunena.
Hi, Tarun. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Awesome. Lovely for to have both of you on this panel with us today. So before we get started into creating a global career, I do want to understand from each of you what got you into PR. How did you get started? Akshata, would you like to go first?
Sure. What got me into PR is really a love for writing and communication. So after my graduation in commerce, actually, I started looking into, initially I was thinking advertising, but I have friends in journalism and that's how I learned about journalism. And then this whole field called public relations and corporate communications. And so I studied a little bit in that and then started working at PR agencies. And now it's 20 years since then.
Nice. So the love for writing was the one that got you into PR. Interesting. Sunena, what about you? What got you into PR?
Hi. So so after a degree in mass communications at Xavier Institute of Communications, I started my career in India with Source PR, followed by IPAN, and genocided me with a solid foundation in the communications area and provided me with the opportunity to work with some of the global leading brands like Unilever, Coca-Cola, De Beers, and Louis Vuitton, just to name a few. So that was my start of my journey in PR.
Awesome. So let's take us through a little bit about how you moved across continents and what is it like working in your country? Yeah.
What brought me to Canada really is personal reasons in that my husband is in computer animation and he was looking to do some continuing education and study 3D. And so we were looking at universities and I thought, well, he's studying, it's a good opportunity for me to also study abroad. I'm a big fan of continuing education and taking breaks in your career to, just learn new skills and just enhance what you know. So we both decided to take a break from our careers in India. We'd both been working for about 7 or 8 years at that point. And we took a break and decided to look at studying opportunities. And we did a lot of research, looked at different colleges in different countries, and landed on Canada for many different reasons, including the courses that we wanted to do and the good things we learned about the country itself. So we decided to move here. We both studied for a year. And to be honest, when we came here to study, we weren't 100% sure if we were going to move permanently. We were playing it by ear and seeing how it goes. And we really enjoyed the studying experience. We really enjoyed the working experience after that. And then before we knew it, Canada is home now.
And that's a very interesting, thing that you mentioned about wanting to upskill and wanting to study. I think it's a lovely way to live a life. You have to constantly keep doing that, take breaks, and you never know what the next phase of life will bring for you. Sunina, what about you?
Sorry, I missed the initial question because of my internet, but was it just my entry into Australia and what caused me to move?
Yeah.
So I moved to Australia for personal reasons as well. I married someone who was already living in Australia. So I moved to Brisbane, Australia, end of 2007. And I just thought that that's, if this is where we're going to live and if this is home, then I need to find something that I'm interested in and look at continuing my journey in communications, because that's all I knew at the time. And that's how I started my work and started seeking opportunities in the communications space.
Brilliant. So I'm curious, what was it like when you initially started working in Australia? What were the first work culture shockers that you experienced? Were there any?
Was that for me? Or
that's for you?
Yeah. I think they were not shockers as such. It was more of a refreshing change, to be honest, because it's the work culture is very different in Australia. There's a very good work-life balance. People start early, finish early, but because the priorities are there's family, there's you want to come back home to your family, to your kids. A lot of people don't have any support. So that's your priority. So I think it was interesting. I think just understanding that it's quality over quantity. Nobody cares how long you've been, how many hours you spend at work. It's just about delivering it well. So that was a refreshing change. It was not a shocker. It was a good change.
That's a lovely change. I think that change is also coming about in the Indian industry. I do remember when we started out, Sunina, I think we used to work from 7 in the morning till 3 in the night and possibly repeat that every day. And I think that change or realization that it's not about the number of hours that you work, but the quality of the hours that you put in, it's coming in the Indian industry as well. Akshata, what were the kind of shockers for you, or were there any?
Yeah, I think I echo what Sunana said in a sense. I don't think there were shockers. It was just getting used to the new culture and the way people do things here. There was the thing I loved when I started working here is the absolute respect for work-life balance. To Sunana's point, people need to get back to their own lives, take time for themselves to be able to perform well at work. And that's something that I've seen consistently at any organization I've worked here. And I'm happy to hear that that's also the culture in India more and more, because I think within any industry and even in communication, I feel it's important for leaders in the organizations to realize that taking time for yourself means you have employees who are more engaged and more committed. And enjoying what they do, which shows in the results. So there's a huge respect and work ethic around that in Canada, which I really appreciate. The only thing I would say wasn't a shocker, but something I had to learn was, and maybe this is true for a lot of countries, is your writing style may be a little bit unique to that country. So in Canada, we have something called Canadian press style writing. which required me to learn some of the nuances of how things are written here. There are little things like we don't spell numbers between 1 and 9. We spell numbers between 1 and 9, and we don't spell numbers beyond that. We use numerals. So little things like that, which are unique to the Canadian journalism kind of writing. So there were some things like that I had to learn, and that's where it was helpful that I went to school here for that. So it helped me kind of get quickly up to speed on how people write here, how business communication is managed.
That's interesting. I think it's unique to every country. And Sunina, for you, did you have to acquire new skill sets to be able to work in Australia?
So I did have to reconsider what I wanted to do in Australia in terms of communication. So it was at the time getting your foot in the door, because people do generally value local experience. What really helped me and actually put me in good stead was the fact that I had worked on global brands. So that got my CVs read, at least read, and I got that initial call. But after that, it was just getting my foot in the door. So the first consultancy I worked with, I worked in the investor relations division of this company. It wasn't an area that I wanted to work in, but it was, like I said, getting that foot in the door. And once you know that you have that strong communications, solid background, it was then easy for me to then diversify and go into an area that interested me. So that's how then I moved into government relations within the same company. And that actually, and I was in that consultancy for 2.5 years, and then moved to a corporate communications role. So it's when you move overseas to another country, I think one of the things, you can't be very rigid about, you need to be flexible. You need to be able to adapt to what the requirement is at the time.
Interesting. Akshata, was it similar for you, or were there any differences?
Yeah, similar in that what Sunayana said about getting the foot in the door is critical, because at least when I moved here, I found I had to really explain my experience back in India, and there wasn't a lot of awareness around how the business community works in India or Bombay. So I found I had to make a lot of connections and help people understand my experience. So, for example, people here don't necessarily know the organizations that I worked with in India, whereas in India they're global known brands. So I had to draw connections and kind of use examples here of organizations to say it's kind of like this organization in Canada. So it gives them some context around what experience I have. So to get in the foot in the door, I agree with Sunayana. You have to be open. You have to be able to. Sometimes you may need to even step down 1 or 2 levels. I'm being very honest. I had to do that, even though I had a very successful career in India. When I moved here, I did have to start as an intern at a PR agency. Now, I could have decided that I didn't want to do that and waited longer and maybe found a job eventually, but I was anxious to get into the work field. And I've always believed PR agencies are really great places to get a lot of experience really quickly. And it gives you exposure to a lot more brands and a lot more work scenarios and experiences quickly. So I decided to take that internship, and that internship turned into a full-time job. And I worked at the agency for a while and then moved into corporate communications. But the one thing I will say is, for a lot of organizations, I think that it still holds true, especially in communications, is they're looking for people who have experience, but also the eligibility to work in the country, because a lot of them are hesitant to put in the time, effort, or resources to sponsor people's immigration status. So that's something, it's always helpful if you're coming here or to any country with an immigration status of some kind, whether it's to study or work permit or whatever that looks like. It definitely helps you get that foot in the door faster. It's different for the IT industry, I think, where people do move with work and they get opportunities abroad for work. I would say it's a little bit different for communication, at least in my experience.
How is it different?
It's different in that it's hard to get organizations to sponsor you unless, for example, and I have a friend who's experienced this, where you're working in an agency or an organization that has a very strong global presence. So then you're able to kind of use your connections and, help get a job opportunity in the same organization in a different country. So that is possible. And that may be a case where they would be even willing to sponsor you because they know you as an employee and they're willing to invest in you. But when you move to a new country and you're net new, they don't know you, they don't know your experience. And if you're moving somewhere where you don't have a lot of connections, if you haven't really built your professional network, then it's harder to get companies to sponsor you. So that's where I think if you are looking at a global career and moving abroad, I think I would say while you're looking at job opportunities, also look at what immigration requirements you need to meet and what status you need to have to be able to get that job easily.
Absolutely. I think it's very essential. We'll come back to that question. There is a leading question from there, but I do want to know from Sunayana. Sunayana, what's your experience of getting a foot in the door, which you were talking about? Moving through agencies or getting into an agency first or getting into a corporate communication function first. What would be your advice to somebody who's moving into your country?
I personally believe that starting with an agency is actually a better way to do it. Preference, because like I said before, preference remains for local experience, more so in corporate than agencies. Agencies may also have shorter term contracts, whether they're maternity leave covers or, just short term project contracts, project based contracts. So I wouldn't narrow something down by a role. So I definitely feel, being open to that, being open to diversifying your experience helps. And I also want to add to what Akshata said there. It is very true. A lot of people start, be open to starting from scratch because it's about proving yourself. You may have that comms knowledge and that strong background, which will hold you in good stead. But don't be afraid to start from scratch. But also in countries like Australia and most countries, I think there is that dignity of labor. So no job is too small. You don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Everyone's there to do a job to contribute to the bigger picture. And I think your role, your job is valued for your contribution to that bigger picture. So so it's different from that perspective.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm going to come back to the question, the answer that you mentioned earlier, Akshata, about immigration status, right?
Yeah.
What is the kind of, requirements or what are the kind of visas or work permits that one requires to work in Canada? And Sunayana, I'll come to you also because we would want to know that for Australia as well.
Sure. So in Canada, and my experience was 13 years ago, so things have changed since then. So I won't profess to be an expert in this, but essentially we moved here on a study permit. And in Canada, with some courses where, especially with postgraduate education, if you are doing, say, a 1-year program, then you get an equivalent open work permit for that same duration. It may differ depending on which province or which colleges you're looking at, but that's kind of what worked for us. So we decided to study. So when we got our study permit, we automatically had that 1-year work permit. And that was really helpful for me to get that first internship because my organization that was hiring me didn't have to worry about sponsoring me at all. And then while that work permit was still valid, we had applied for permanent residency, which is kind of like the green card in the US, same idea. So we applied for that, and literally as my work permit was coming to an end, we were granted PR. And then so that way I was able to continue working. In a lot of countries, there are also what they do is they have a list of occupations that will decide whether you get that work permit or not, or whether you get PR. So every country has very different ways of approaching it. So I would say do a lot of research. Fortunately, all the websites are really great. Like our Canadian immigration website is fantastic. It tells you everything you need to know. It walks you through the steps. And there are, of course, immigration consultants also, I'm sure, in India who can support you if you need that kind of help. But I would really advise do a lot of research, understand where your occupation falls within that country's immigration opportunities, and work towards that. Because having that status, to me, I feel it's important. It really makes your journey to getting a job that much easier.
Absolutely. What about you, Sunina? How was it? How was it in Australia?
So, like I said, I moved for personal reasons, and it was never meant to be a career move. So the visa that I came on allowed me to work almost instantly. So which was lucky. But like Akshata said, I think getting the relevant visa, so be it skilled migration, you could be coming into Australia on skilled migration visa or permanent residency, and then looking to gain local experience. You can do that by going through a migration agent, and you would probably there'll be a lot of them in India, but also visit the immigration website for more information, because I don't claim to be an expert like Akshata in this space. But once you're in Australia, then you have the option of going through recruitment agencies, applying for jobs on career sites like seek.com.au, applying for jobs on LinkedIn. And again, I think I'm just echoing Akshata here when I say that there may be multinational companies that have offices in other countries of your interest. So if you're working for a company that is a multinational company and it has offices in countries of interest, you could go through the right channels that way within your company to make that transition happen. But I want to add here that very rarely would you be someone who's based in India and you're trying to find a job, or you find something on an Australian job search site, but when you apply, you can't really expect to get a look in, because most advertised jobs will come with the condition that the applicant needs to have Australian residency or citizenship, unless it is a very, very specialized job, which a role in communications doesn't tend to be. The preference would be to consider the 200 other odd, local applicants who've applied, as opposed to considering someone who is applying from India without local experience.
Absolutely. So there's an interesting question that one of our audiences has put in. Considering that media industry in India is probably, I think, one of the largest industries, and when you compare it with Canada or with Australia, obviously there's a huge difference. So how difficult was it to land a job in Australia or Canada, considering the media, the very limited scope with media as such? Which also might lead to another question in terms of the what is the kind of role that a communication expert or a PR expert does within your country? Is it very different from what we do in India? What are the kind of changes that you felt your job would entail when you joined? Sorry, why don't you go first on that?
Sorry, who?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so from a media perspective, what I found was interesting is because we have so many media outlets in India, it really gives you a crash course on how to work with, because it's not just the volume, it's also the different languages, the different geographies. I think it really trains PR professionals in India really well on media relations. I do think we having worked in PR agencies in India as well, I do think it gives us a really solid foundation in media relations because you're dealing with such diverse media outlets. In Canada, I found that experience really helped me when I was working at a PR agency in the beginning. There aren't that many media outlets here as compared to India. Also fewer languages. It's mostly French and English. And even French is very geography based, so it's mostly English. And we do have local geographic media outlets based on geography, of course, but they're far fewer than what I was used to in India. So that was helpful. In terms of working with media relations or corporate communications, I feel the good news there is the principles stay the same. I think in terms of, whatever you've learned in your career in terms of the basics of start with objectives, strategy, planning, key messages, all of that, that's kind of ingrained in all of us, is the same wherever you move, I think. So the principles and basics of public relations, media relations, corporate communications are the same. What makes it challenging is understanding the local nuances, understanding the local businesses, how they communicate, how often they communicate. Also, leadership communication, how that differs from country to country, the tone and language and sentiment and all of that. That's learning the nuances is what comes in time as you start your career in a new country. But but the good thing is, if you have a solid foundation in India, it'll absolutely hold you in good stead wherever you go.
Awesome. Good to know all the long hours that we put in media relations would come in use. Sunayana, what was it like for you? And I do want to know, what was your reaction when initially you were handed the first media list?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was interesting actually, and an example of that is, so I was in investor relations, and investor relations, obviously the publications, it's even lesser than some of the other, for consumer goods, the kind of or entertainment, the kind of publications you would target or media you would target. So I remember going to they're mostly one-on-one briefings more than they don't tend to do large press conferences, and I remember we pitched something and we had the briefing, and the next day I opened the newspaper and it wasn't there, and I was actually upset, and I thought, oh my god, no, what do we do? And it wasn't a big deal, because it's I think in Australia it's there's not as much important. It's the long-term relationship building rather than that instant gratification. I think in India, a lot of importance is placed on that media coverage, getting things in that publication the next day. And if you don't, that's one of the crosses against you. But I think for in Australia, the experience I've had, and this is just over and above what Akshata has so well put, is they're looking at long-term results. A brand building exercise may involve using a combination of traditional media. It'll be social media, it can be digital campaigns, there may be sponsorship involved, so there's philanthropy, there's stakeholder engagement. So it's a bit of a slow burn. There are things like full year results and half year results where you expect the relevant publications, if you have had a good result, if your company's had a good result, to carry something the next day. But having said that, it's really that slow burn. It's about the long-term relationship building.
So tell me a little bit more about, what does your current job entail? Sunayana, that's for you.
Okay. So for me, currently, I'm in my current role, I'm responsible for the development and execution of the brand strategy for my company, managing various brand and marketing campaigns, the digital marketing channels, advertising. But it's not so much the traditional form of advertising, but a lot of digital advertising, competitive tenders and bids. My team, we support that, and also essentially any other brand touch points that you can think of. So that's essentially what I do in my current job. But yeah, I've been in the same company. I've worked in stakeholder engagement, government relations, and moved across different roles.
Excellent. So did this require you learning on the job, or was there a special, course or any special education that you took to upskill?
Not really. I think there was a lot of on-the-job learning for me. So the corporate communications experience that I had in India, having worked on these different brands, and the brand building, the brand building exercises that I was involved in, did hold me in good stead here. But yeah, there was a lot of on-the-job learning. I've learned, digital marketing. Again, like I said, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. And I've there were things that are out of my comfort zone. So even when I manage the back end of our website, we obviously have suppliers to do that. But I've learned a little bit of coding here and there, just a little bit of changes that I can do myself if I have to. So I think it's mainly been on the job learning, and I think that's what excites me, because you never stop learning when and that would be my advice. I think don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing, because you never know. Digital marketing is here to stay, and I feel that's very strongly. Try and make use of the best tools and techniques that's made available to you.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Akshata, tell us a little bit more about what you are doing in your current job role. I believe it's slightly different from what Sunayana is doing right now. Could you tell us a little more about it?
After I moved to Canada and I was working at PR agencies, and when I was looking at organizations, I made a personal decision to start working for organizations that are doing some good in the world in whatever form. So I started looking for job opportunities with that in mind, just because I wanted that, alignment with core values and the values that I have and what I would like to have in my employer. So currently I'm working at HOOPP, which is a pension plan for healthcare workers. And essentially our mission is to deliver on our pension promise to them so that they have a secure retirement and they can retire with dignity. And so my role specifically is strategic communications. So my team and I essentially handle the internal and external communication requirements of the organization. We support all the divisions within our organization, support them with both internal and external. We do have a separate PR and media relations team as well. I'm more focused on the customer-facing, member-facing communication, and of course, employee communications. Those are areas that really interest me. So that's where I've decided to focus my career on.
Excellent. So how, both of you have been in PR agencies in India as well as in your respective countries. How are PR agencies different in both countries? Akshata, you first?
Sure. I would say PR agencies, again, I find when I started working at the PR agency in Canada, I found the principles and the general, requirements of working in a PR agency were similar. It was really learning the nuances around how they do press releases here, or how there are small differences in, for example, how a press release is written or formatted. The language that is used, like I said, there's the Canadian press style writing. Each organization has its own tone and voice that you need to kind of learn as you work more and more with a brand. You learn their own voice and you start to communicate with that. I think the basics and the principles are the same again. It's really just putting in the work and time and effort to learn the brands that you're working with so that you can help them communicate and have their best voice to their audiences.
Wonderful. So understanding the nuances is equally important as much as the experience, the basics, learning the basics as well, right? Sunina, how about you? How are PR agencies in Australia different from those in India?
I think I pretty much would, repeat what Akshata said there. It is the nuances, and it is that writing style. Having a good, strong communication, having good, strong communications background helps. But also that narrative, being able to do, being good at storytelling. That really helped. In getting that big picture and communicating that to the audience, or to the target audience. I think, like Akshata said again, the language and style guide. So every company has their own language and style guide. Following that to the best you can, and to the best of your ability, and sticking to that, because that really helps as well. So I think it is a very similar structure, and also some of the communicate. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of feedback. I'm not sure if you're getting that.
No.
So also divisions, like in Australia, when I started in a consultancy, there are different divisions. So there's consumer brands was one, investor relations was another, stakeholder engagement was one. Again, I tried to move into stakeholder engagement and government relations, but that is something that needs that does need years and years of knowing the local government, and I wasn't born here, so I think I didn't follow the political scene as well. So I think it was great to have a mentor in that space who I could learn so much from, and he was a gentleman who had been in that government relation, who had worked in that government relations space for many years, and it was great to have that mentor to bounce ideas off, but also to understand what is it that I need to be focusing on, and how is it that I need to be building my relationship in this space, because it's not something you learn overnight. It is a slow burn. It is something that you need to skill yourself on and read a lot of. So I think that was a new area for me, and I had to learn.
Awesome. So in hindsight, when you look at it, I understand these were all unplanned moves for you. In hindsight, if you were to look at it and say that, I intentionally want to create a global career, how would you go about doing that? Sunana, you want to go first on that?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about this. I would have preferred, so my industry right now is very different from what I started out in. I'm still getting a lot of feedback. Can you hear me okay? Yep, okay. So I think if I had the opportunity, I would have loved to work in the kind of brands, or with the kind of brands that I was working in India. But for that, I would have had to be in a city. So I'm in Australia, but I'm in Brisbane. So cities like Sydney and Melbourne have most of your global brands like Louis Vuitton or Unilevers of Johnson and Johnson of the world. So that's where the head offices are. Now, the Brisbane is the headquarters of Brisbane. So it is the capital of Queensland, the state. Now, this is a state that is rich in minerals and mining services and infrastructure services. Once again, flexibility there. It wasn't my first choice, but it's what interests me is these are things that, so the company that I work for currently actually enables transporting goods and services or minerals and resources from mines to the ports for international export, but also being able to now talking about that sustainability story, and how is it that rail contributes to lesser emissions and actually it consumes less fuel than road transportation. So being able to speak, understand all the different nuances of the industry, but also what is the good news story here, and what is it that you want to promote and talk about, and how is it that you want to build the brand, whether it's as an employer of choice or it's the industry that you want to promote. So there are different opportunities, but yes, it's a different industry from where I started.
Okay. Akshata, what about you? I know it was somewhat sort of planned, but if you were to do it again, in hindsight, would you have started earlier? Or would you have chosen a different path?
I think I would still do what we did then, only because I find putting in the time to study, if that's an option for you, it really helps you build those early connections in a country, especially if you don't have any family or friends or relatives or in the new country that you wish to make a new life in. I think studying really helped us build our initial network, and some of my best friends in Canada are people I went to school with 13 years ago. So I would highly recommend it as a way to upskill and learn the nuances of how communications are done in the country you want to move in, and the bonuses that you get to meet people, you get to work with them on assignments, and you get to make friends, and I feel it's a very important part of moving to a new country is embracing everything it has to offer in terms of the people, the culture, the food, the geography, the seasons, everything that comes with it. And that can be overwhelming for someone who's net new to a country. So having a good network of people that you can rely on as friends, as professionals, definitely helps. So if it's an option, I would say definitely look at some form of studying to kind of get you that upskill potential. And then if that isn't, I would still say do a lot of research um, on two fronts. One is the immigration front. You really need to know the nuances of what the country is looking for, what type of professionals, what categories of immigration are available, what allows you to study or work or all of that. And then on the professional side, to really look at, if the world is your oyster, where do you want to work? What are the brands you want to work with? What geographies do you want to work in? Because all those decisions, I think, will help shape where you feel you can have a really good experience and a realistic possibility of a great career. I think both those work hand in hand, the immigration side as well as the professional side. The one thing I will say is, which I think works well now, is a lot of organizations have a big focus on diversity and inclusion, which, to be honest, wasn't the case when I moved here long ago. And I find that really helps new Canadians or immigrants who are moving to new countries, because there's a greater appreciation for people coming with diverse backgrounds and experiences. And there's definitely a need and an appetite to give those people the opportunities, because organizations are realizing the more diverse your workforce, the more engaged and the better business outcomes, right? So I think that works well for people, anyone who's planning to immigrate. I think having that openness, even for organizations, is definitely helpful now.
Absolutely. I think you hit upon a nerve there. Networking is one of our bread and butters as PR professionals, irrespective of where we are in the world. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Diversity is one of the big talk points nowadays within the communication industry as well. And I don't think there was a better time to shift. If anybody is thinking of making a global career, guys, now is the time. So make it real for us. Make it, if you can bring alive a campaign that you've done, and how was it different from something that you would have done in India? I think it'll help our audiences understand, the practical know-hows of how things work in your country. Sunina, would you like to go first?
Sure. So one of the campaigns that, and there are so many, but one of the campaigns that I worked on in my current company was because we just spoke about diversity and inclusion, and that's just top of mind for me. Was It is a very male-dominated industry, and the company has made great inroads in increasing the number of, almost doubling the number of women working in this company. And in the last 7 years, women are more than 25% of the workforce, which was 13% to start with. So it is. Or even lesser. So it is. It's been a big campaign. It's not just gender diversity, but also cultural diversity. Hiring more people of indigenous background, and again, it's all about the diversity of thought. So there was a different. It was a multi-level marketing campaign, but to attract these people and then retain them. I also work. There's a gender balance reference group that this company has, and I'm a member of that group. And it's really aimed at creating and supporting an inclusive workplace culture. And the idea is to work towards creating solutions that allows an organization to create and maintain a future workforce composition that is representative of a balanced workforce. And that's balance that provides you with, diversity of thoughts and, ideas. So I think that's been a great initiative. And I'm personally, very close to, or I'm very passionate about the topic on gender pay gap. That was my final project in the MBA that I completed. So again, what is it that a company can do to reduce that? It's internal. There's a lot of internal communications, but also externally, letting everyone know that this company is serious about inclusion and diversity.
So let me rephrase that a little bit. If you were in India and were to launch this here, how would it be different from the strategy that you took by launching it in Australia?
So it wasn't. So I'm not sure in
Okay,
India, and it's been.
let me flip that around. Let me flip that around, right? What's one unique thing which, let's say, does not exist in India, but you had to learn and figure out how to make use of it to make sure that the campaign that you're running has impact on the local audiences there?
Um, so I think it wasn't your traditional form of marketing. Yes, there was a bit of advertising, which is quite. It can be to your face because nobody likes to be told that we are not hiring you because you're a male, and that wasn't what we were doing. But it was about breaking that cycle, really. So it had to be a little bit of a mix of everything. So there was a bit of digital marketing, but also being, I think, the CEO comms, the CEO was unapologetic about it, that yes, we are a male dominated company. We've been that for many, many years, but things have to change for the results to change. So getting it was like an all pronged approach where you're getting the CEO involved, you're getting your employees engaged, you are obviously attracting new people, but you're also trying to retain the existing employee base. So I think given the number of different teams that were involved, I'm just not sure. I've not worked in India for a long time. It was very differently done, and to their credit, to our credit, I think as a team, it was well executed, and it did the job. It delivered the message effectively.
Awesome. I'm sure your team would be very glad to hear that. Akshita, what about you? Tell us a little bit about, rather a lot about one of the campaigns that you've done, which has made an impact in your current role.
I think the thing I love about my current role is a lot of the leadership communication that we do. I love being for my team and I to be that liaison between the senior leadership team and the employees, and to help shape messages that resonate with them. And again, diversity and inclusion is a big one. I'm personally very, very passionate about the topic, whether it's pride or gender diversity, cultural diversity, all of it's such a broad topic. It's and so much potential to work on different communication campaigns around it. We as an organization, I'm very proud to work for an organization that is so committed to it. Every single leader, single senior leader is committed to it. They've made a personal commitment to make sure that diversity is front and center in our organization, and to be able to work on communicating that and shaping what the communication looks like around that is really exciting.
Awesome. So let's come to the holy grail of PR in terms of measurement. How do you measure success in your campaigns? Akshita.
I think that's one thing that maybe is different from what I remember how we used to do it in India. And it's possibly because of the type of brands I used to work with at that time, so for example, when I used to work for Sony Entertainment, when we worked at Genesis and I was supporting Sony and launching their TV shows, Indian Idol and Jesse Coiney and all of those. I remember it was the volume of coverage that mattered, right? Like, yes, it was the quality too, but we were always chasing these big binders of coverage and it made us feel so good about it. And it was great work. I really, really enjoyed working on those campaigns. But it's so different when I moved here. It's to Sunayana's point, because the number of media outlets are less, first of all. And also the focus is not so much on lots of coverage fast. It's building those relationships, and you may get one article in 6 months, but it's a really good article and a good positioning, and that to us is success now. So when we start with any campaign, it's really identifying what those success parameters are. Like, We start really with if we know what our 3 or 4 objectives are, how are we measuring this? Because without that, it's really hard to say whether this campaign is successful or not. So and then when we measure things, it's really on different levels. It's if it's employee communication, it's essentially engagement with content. How much are people reading content? How much are they engaging with it? How many are commenting? There's a huge digital aspect to it, and the great thing about digital media is it gives you that accountability and measurability so quickly. Most of the channels we use for communication, I think globally, allow us to measure so well. So those are definitely built into our parameters in terms of social. If it's social media, it's really how much engagement, how many followers are we adding, like all of that kind of adds up. And then on our websites, like whether it's the intranet or our website, again, we're always monitoring traffic. We're always, and it's not always about the numbers. It's also looking at what type of content is resonating. What are the messages that are resonating? We do A/B testing with subject lines on, communication emails to see with focus groups, what is working better, what is resonating more, what is giving us more click-throughs or open rates. I think it's a combination of all of those analytics, and we actually have dedicated people in our team looking at those analytics, creating insightful reports for us, which helps the rest of the team tweak or modify our communication techniques or channels or audiences based on that. So I think having the analytical ability within the team is critical.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I have heard a lot of communicators on these sessions, on other sessions also mention this for external communication, but not really a lot of them for internal communication. That's interesting that you do that even for your internal audiences.
Absolutely. We actually use a software called Banana Tag, in fact, for internal emails. So we send out employee newsletters every week, and we're always tracking measurement of click-through rates for the articles,
Right,
open rates. All of that helps us understand what are employees liking, what is the type of content they like to read, what is
right.
resonating more, because there's so much information overload internally and externally, right? Like you really, really need the analytics to guide your campaigns because otherwise you're just shooting blind, right?
Absolutely. Sunina, what about you? How do you guys measure success?
Yeah. So, like Akshata said, I think at the start of a campaign, it's really defining what does success mean to us. What would we consider to be successful, or this campaign that it was a successful campaign. How would we call that? So it's really again the content. Is it really resonating with the target audience that this campaign is targeted at? Are people watching the video that you've produced, and do they just bounce off the page in 15 seconds or 30 seconds, or do they not even get to the end of the video? So does that mean that short form content is the way to go? So yes, we have analytics that we use. Besides Google Analytics, the CMS that we use for that sits behind our website has its own monitoring capabilities. We have social media listening tools, monitoring and listening tools that we use. With some of the internal campaigns, it's about keeping your employees engaged and motivated. And one of the things that gained a lot of traction in my organization were these digital employee blogs, so producing digital stories to promote the company. But it was about using your employees and their respective stories to articulate what is it that the company does, what is his or her role, and how is he contributing to the big picture. So we could again track the success of those campaigns and see if people were really watching that because it was their colleague talking. We were not these were not video blogs of the CEO of or senior leadership team. It was someone in a regional office who was either in operations talking about his day in the company and how and why, what motivated him or her to come get up and come into work every single day. So yeah, I think measurement is really important because, like Akshata said, you're flying blind. Otherwise, you don't know if you need to tweak your campaign. If if there's a campaign where you're getting a lot of applications from a particular state or a particular city, and you want to close that, you're just inundated with applications from that city, then you need to be able to tweak that and stop the advertising in that particular region. So yes, monitoring, tracking, using all these tools that are available these days, it's important.
Absolutely. So what's your favorite tool to use? What's your go-to tool?
So again, I can't really pick one. So for social media, we use Hootsuite a lot, just to track, just to be able to see our different channels in one go and see, just ensuring that we're responding to people's inquiries as well. There is Google Analytics is a good one, just from a website perspective. We also use a company for short form content where you are able to produce videos in real time, and this company helps you edit them in real time so that you are giving the audience what they need in not tomorrow but now, because the need is now. So yes, there are different tools, and some may be specific to Australia, I'm not sure.
Absolutely. I think they're pretty much available everywhere else as well. Akshata, what about you? Your favorite go-to tool?
I think it's the same as Sunina said. It's a combination of many different tools. I think that's also critical because it gives you a more wholesome view of analytics. You don't always want to rely on one particular tool for your analytics. You want to get it from different sources so that you're getting a more good bird's eye wholesome view. So it's Google Analytics, Hootsuite, and each of the tools we use have their own analytics built into it. So it's helpful depending on what you're trying to achieve. It's always good when you're trying to get vendors involved or implement tools. It's good to understand whether they're actually giving you the analytics you need. And there's so many available. Like I think that you can pick and choose like what you need, what works for your business. But one thing I want to add on analytics is the other thing it really helps with is helping you have more confident conversations with your partners internally or with your clients if you're in a PR agency. When you have analytics to back your recommendations, it helps you make those recommendations a lot more confidently because you're basing it on analytics and real-time data and not your own gut instinct. And because your gut instinct is good and you know that, but it's sometimes hard to sell it to your partners or clients, analytics can really, really help with that part.
Absolutely. Numbers always help. So we are running out of time. I'm going to do a little bit of a fireside chat, quick rapid fire round with both of you before we end the session. And these are directed to both of you, so feel free to jump in. Yeah. First question being 3 skills you need to have when moving abroad. This will be just an encapsulation of what we've spoken about, but I would like to leave the audience with this fireside, this quick rapid fire round. 3 skills, your top skills.
I would say these are life skills: listening, learning, and being open to experimenting. I would say these are life skills, not just for communication.
Right. Sunayana, what about you?
Yeah, I think flexibility. Again, these are life skills, like Akshata said. I would add to the whole the listening one. I think it's very important if to listen and to get that feedback. But also a good writing and communication skill. Just in the industry you're in, you need that.
Absolutely. 3 top verticals to build an expertise in if one were to move to the country of your residence. What could be that one, those 3 verticals that one can build an expertise in while being in India?
I think media relations, corporate communications, leadership communication. I feel those are broad, big areas where if you have a solid foundation in those, it'll work for you anywhere.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think I can just add to that just digital marketing, and because that's my area and I'm passionate because that's, again, digital marketing is here to stay, whether it's social media marketing or just digital marketing.
Very good point.
Yeah, right. Digital marketing is definitely here to stay. 3 things that you must do when you land in your country. It could be anything.
That's a tricky one. I would say just embrace everything it offers. Like, don't be afraid to, you know, embrace everything a new country offers you. I feel a lot of times we are hesitant because we are always second guessing ourselves.
Right.
And I know I've had people tell me because I'm in communications, I'm more aware of my accent when I move abroad. And to that, I would say, my husband shared a quote with me in which, and I'm sorry, I don't remember where it comes from, but it basically said, um, if someone is speaking with an accent, it means they know one more language than you do, and possibly even more languages. So remember that if you ever feel self-conscious or if you're too critical of yourself when you move abroad, remember that you actually come with a lot of experience and a lot of work and life experience. So don't ever short sell yourself.
That's a lovely one. Sunina?
Enjoying the culture, the new country. Make an effort to get to know the people, the culture, the history. It's yeah. And again, don't be confident with what you've got. Be confident of your skills, but at the same time, do it with a dose of humility, because I think it goes a long way.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of what you guys spoke today was more of life skills, more of sense, and general leadership building within within oneself as well. And I do hope that all our audiences who are listening to it today and will listen to it over the weekend will gain a lot of insights from this conversation. We've run out of time, so I would like to thank both of you for joining us today. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I know it's weird timings in both your countries, but you making the time for us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, Tarun.
Yeah. So, guys, that was Akshata and Sunayana sharing with us more about how they created a successful career for themselves. I do hope this session has helped you and you will be able to follow in their footsteps as well. Thank you for joining us today. I would also take this time to thank our content curators, Sonali and Pooja, our industry partner, PRCAI, and media partner, Agency Reporter, for supporting us today. Do join us for the next session on next Saturday. But before we end the session, don't forget to check out the special offer from Agency Reporter for their 40 under 40 list. If you haven't seen it already, check it out today. Today is the last day for submissions, so please go ahead and fill that form.